There we go. Thank you for reminding me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ziggy. So challenge number one is I'm going to present my screen. Let's see if I can get this right first. Hopefully everyone can see this, but let me know if you can't. Can everyone see? Just check, just to double check you can see these slides?
Yes.
Sweet.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, go for it, Rhiannon. Take it away.
Awesome. So kia ora, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for having us. We're very excited to speak to you all. So as our lovely host Ziggy just said, my name is Rhiannon. My pronouns are they, them, and then this is Aaron. And we work for Red Vesper, which is a business analysis consultancy. And what we do is we help people, organizations, and businesses to realize their potential. So we're really excited to be here. So our goal today is to share some brainstorming alternatives. So what that's going to look like is we're going to do a little bit of talking about design thinking, a little bit about ideation. What does that actually mean? We're going to introduce you to two new techniques, alter egos and role play. And then we're going to have a little breakout session where we're going to put it into practice, learn a bit more about those techniques and have a go at it as a group. And then we'll do our Q&A. And it's worth saying, even though we're only introducing you two ideas today, there are a whole lot more available for you out there. And we really encourage you to find things that work for you and go with it. So I'll pass on to Aaron, who's going to talk a little about design thinking.
Perfect. Thanks, Rhiannon. So I guess it's good, before we get into the nitty gritty, just to do a quick brush up on what design thinking is. And in a nutshell, effectively what it is it's a creative process to figure out and discover problems and also understand the needs that people have. And it's a process that formalize the ways that designers think and the way that they process information and how they solve problems, whether you're an architect or a product designer or interior designer too. And where it came out of initially was a place called IDEO. And there was two, it's always easy to dumb it down to two names, but there was two key names, David Kelly and also Tim Brown as well. And they came out of Stanford University at the time. They're both industrial designers. And there was a lot of discussion about, oh, well, what about, how can we actually formalize the way that we work creatively? And is there an application to actually formalize it in a way that any business can pick it up? So they sat down and started to think about, okay, well, gosh, okay, how do we actually do these things? And what it came down to was there was two kind of key principles behind the way that they worked. And the very first principle they thought about was, whenever you want to make something, you've really got to answer these three questions. And that's, do people actually want it? Can we actually make it? And is it, actually morally, I guess, should we make it as well? And so what it really comes down to is, I suppose, there's no point making something technically that can be done, or indeed could make money if no one wants it. And it would also be true that if everyone would love to have it, but we can't technically make it, it's also a lost venture as well. So we're always looking to balance those three qualities, and they're really important cornerstones of the way you should think, especially at the initial stages of projects. And so that was kind of the first key principle that they brought to the table. And then the second was this technique called the double diamond. And what it is it's basically a process that almost every project will go through initially, where you start off trying to define the problem that you're trying to solve. You're trying to build empathy and understand the folks you want to help. Then you actually converge and you define and you say, okay, this is actually the issue that we're looking into. Then you develop different ideas and explore the possibilities by prototyping. And then when you've got to a place where you actually feel really solid about it, you then go out and deliver. And so what we're going to be looking at today is the step in between these two diamonds, which is ideation. And what the goal of ideation is to help us go from a mindset of what's the problem and what have we found, to what's the world of the possible, what can we actually bring to the table in order to solve these problems? And it's quite a important part of the process because you're switching on a completely different part of your brain that normally, you don't get to use as actively every single day. And so what I'll do now is I'll pass it back to Rhiannon, who will kind of unpack. I know that obviously one of the key techniques that everyone loves and talks about is brainstorming. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more before we actually get into the two techniques as alternatives. So
I think loves is a bit of a strong word there, Aaron, but yeah, brainstorming, we use it all the time, but it's actually not very effective. And we're not just pulling that statement out of thin air. There's been studies, and I'm sure that you would have observed it in your own practice, that brainstorming doesn't actually always get the best results. So why doesn't it get the best results? Well, what we're asking of people is actually quite a tall ask. Normally it happens where we think we've got a bit of a problem, and so we'll send out a meeting invite, we'll get all the group together in a room, we'll pass out some whiteboard markers or some post-its, good on 3M, and we'll just kind of throw this lofty task at people. All right, I know that you've just been doing business as usual work, and usually you have to think of very practical solutions to all the problems you're facing, but now all of a sudden you have to be imagination, and that's just a lot to ask, so there's no kind of warm-up, there's often no structure. Sometimes if you're with someone who's been facilitating for a little bit longer, they might time box things, but most of the time it's just kind of a bit of a get in there and do your thing, which isn't actually a very productive way to work. So yeah, and like I said, it's hard to be creative, especially when you've been solving really practical stuff all day, to just make that switch straight away. And there's also this other thing going on where brainstorming often really favors the extroverts in the room. It's the loudest people, the people who feel the most comfortable, those sorts of people who often get all their ideas through, where the introverts are a little bit left out, even though they're the ones that often have some of the best ideas because they're sitting there, they're listening. And the research shows that one of the big things that impacts the quality of brainstorming is groupthink. So there's these biases that happen towards the ideas that are brought up early to the ideas that are brought up by the leadership, to the ideas that are brought up by the loudest person. And that kind of funnels everyone towards a certain direction, whether it's intentional or not. And so we're going to attempt to solve some of those problems with our activities. Now, we won't manage to solve all of them, but we'll certainly end up in a better spot than brainstorming. And like I said before, we're presenting you with two options here, but actually there's a whole heck of a lot more, and you can really get creative and create a space for people outside of the regular work environment to say, we're actually moving into this more imaginative thing now, and we're going to do an activity, and it's not going to be boring and involve a lot of post-its and a lot of whiteboard pens, or it might, but it's a bit more of a shake-up. So I think that in itself is kind of exciting. So the idea that I'm going to present today is this really cool idea, I think, called alter egos. So it's still a group activity. It's where you get together and you imagine how you'd go about solving a problem if you were led by a famous person, a character, anyone kind of alive or dead, whether it's Steve Jobs, the Queen, or someone fictional like Batman. How would Batman solve our problem today? So it's a really powerful tool when you're facing a novel or unique challenge, or you've been stuck on the same issue for ages and you're really not getting anywhere with it, or when you actually just need to generate a lot of ideas. So you start by thinking about the problem that you want to solve and try and pair it with a corresponding like alter ego. So if you're thinking about cars, you might not want to choose like a Greenpeace advocate, you know? So our example was your company wants to share some really important information about a significant change in the software you're developing. How would John Oliver share that news? So it's all about seeing things from a different perspective. And we often pair this technique of alter egos with something else called an empathy map, which is a collaborative visualization tool used to articulate what we know about a certain type of person. And it like externalizes the knowledge about them to create understanding and help with our decision making. So we look at this and we say, oh, what would John Oliver say or think or feel or do about our problem? Well, he might create a mascot to help users through the change of the software. He might create a catchy jingle to sing or to have a lead user sing about what's changing. He might go out and interview the users on the street to see what they think of the change. You know, it's all about looking at it from a different angle. So taking away what would I do, what would my manager do, what would my team do to actually, if this was being led by someone else completely and in a different realm of thinking, how creative, how wacky can we get? So now I'll pass it over to Aaron to talk about his
cool
technique. Yeah, sorry.
Perfect. No, that's okay. Perfect. Thanks, Rhiannon.
Brain moment there.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So I suppose Rhiannon's technique, alter egos, is really about giving people permission. And that's exactly what role-playing does too, just in an ever so slightly different way, where what we're trying to do is we're trying to basically simulate a new experience. And what that really looks like is making it effectively a set and building props out of cardboard and giving each other roles to role play and explore what this new experience could feel like. And it's a really, really powerful way to understand the interactions that people have or the order of operations, or how they receive value. And also means that you can very, very quickly iterate different props or different techniques. You can take out one role and replace it with another. And it's also a great way to figure out, well, what are the activities that customers will see? And also, what are the activities that they won't see at all, that are hidden in the background? I personally have used role play in the past, especially with folks that you need to really secure, say, their buy-in to get a next layer of funding. And often the biggest challenge is that a lot of the time when you're talking through these concepts at these early stages, they're so hypothetical. And so you can use role play to actually literally bring them into the experience, treat them as a customer, and role play out where eventually this product or service will land. So it's a wonderful way for you to not only iterate, but to secure buy-in as well. And a really awesome example, which is actually from, I'm a big movie fan, so it's from the movie The Founder, which is basically the story behind McDonald's, how that all started. And there's a really great scene where the original founders actually get a bunch of high school students and they pay them like $5 each kind of thing, a couple of bucks their way. And they actually draw out a kitchen on a basketball court. And the reason why they wanted to do that was to see if they could make a burger in 1 minute. So without buying any specific items or things, without any real training, they could give themselves the opportunity by standing on a ladder and just observing how these folks move around this tiny court. And by moving the fryer or the griddle around, they eventually figured out how to actually deliver a burger in a minute, which meant that as time went by and they saw more and more funding and they wanted to stand out from the crowd, it meant that their unique value proposition was really, really well known. It meant that not just in the spaces that they were designing, but also how they train people as well. So it's a very, very powerful technique that you can use to very rapidly express ideas, build empathy as well, and also sell to stakeholders. So you can kind of see these two different techniques. They feel a little bit more well, they feel a little bit more like techniques as opposed to the intention of brainstorming. And as Rhiannon said, there's such a wealth of different tools out there. These are just two to give you a feel for them. And I think what would be helpful after talking with us is these are two different resources that you can definitely check out. And the first one is basically the book based on how to do a design sprint. And it was written by a guy called Jake Knapp. And he developed this process for rapidly ideating and testing ideas within 5 days. And it's a wonderful book, very, very easy to read. But what I really like about it is it gives you a very, very solid structure that you can follow and adapt. It's specifically built for facilitators. So you're basically getting such a deep look behind the red curtain, which means that when you run your own ideation sessions, you've kind of got the timings and structure there already. So it's a great if you're first time having a crack at it. And then there's lots of online resources like Design Thinkers Academy, where you can literally just follow your curiosity in terms of the different elements that you want to look at. I know that IDEO also has plenty of free resources. So I think that's what's so lovely about design thinking and ideation as a whole, is because it's had so many years to evolve now. There's so many resources out there. There's no reason why you should limit yourselves to just these two. But I think these two resources are a good place to start. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to have a crack at these two different techniques. And what that will look like is Rhiannon's going to take one side of the room and I'll take the other. And we're going to use Mural to take you through these two different techniques to give you a little bit of a taster. And then we'll report back after roughly 10 minutes or so. So that's the game plan. Now, I appreciate that some people, you might favor one tool over the other, but I don't want you to worry about that. This is purely about having a crack. You'll get the chance to have a look at the slides afterwards and also the mural boards as well. So you'll absolutely get the chance to play with both, but at least for now, you can just get a wee taster. So yeah, if that's all good. Ziggy, is that okay? Like technically in the background there? Cool.
Yep, that's no problem. I'm about to create the rooms.
Lovely. So what I'll do is I'll stop. Oh, perfect. There you go. Right.
Oh, there's always a bit of a pause while everyone arrives, isn't there? Okay.
I guess everyone will slowly start signing back in. Yeah.
Yeah, they can choose to jump out or just wait until the 60 seconds.
Yeah, that's all good. That's
and
okay.
it comes back. Yeah.
I was going to say as well, I'm just conscious of time. Do you think there's time, Ziggy, to actually for Rhiannon and I to share our screen and kind of show?
Yeah, definitely. So that way people get the flavour of both. Yeah.
Perfect.
I was hoping you were going to do that.
Yeah, no, yeah. Because that's right. It's always hard when you miss. Yeah, you miss a picture. Yeah. Awesome. Is that everyone? Oh, yeah. Yeah, nice. So I was just saying, Rhiannon, what we'll do is we've got a little bit of time to actually just present back. So I think what would be good is if we just show our mural boards individually, we can kind of give people a feel for the two different tools and kind of where we landed. Rhiannon, are you comfortable to go first, or would you like me to go first? Oh, you might be on. Oh, Rhiannon, you're on mute.
unmute. Yes, I can go first.
There you go.
Can
Yeah, perfect.
everyone see my screen?
Aye, sure can.
Okay, so we tackled the same problem as you. So we decided to use Lewis Hamilton. He is the world's #1 race car driver. So he knows a lot about cars and racing, and kind of an expert in the field. So we put him in the center of our empathy map, and we thought about things that he might say. So, well, it's really hard to get other people's details in the middle of the motorway or the speedway. It's way too slow. He might, get his people to sort it. He might find it really stressful, time-consuming. Might be like, where do I even start with this? He might think there must be a better way. He wants to get back on the road ASAP. He might cut his losses and just buy a new car. How much is this going to cost? Maybe I should be the only one on the motorway because I'm the best. Who do I talk to? And obviously this is not my fault because I am #1. And some shock. So what he might do is he might just call his people, right? Because he's wealthy. He might confront the other person, might take some photographs, check that he's safe, check his car, think about the accident. He might feel protected or frustrated or angry or shocked or what's next, or maybe a little bit embarrassed. So when I thought about, well, how might he solve this? So because he's quite wealthy, he might have some electronics in his car, might have like a pretty good phone. He's probably got a dash cam, and he'll probably actually, talk to his lawyer or his PR team or someone like that. So then we kind of came up with this idea, well, what if there was an app on his phone and he had the option to report the accident or not? Because if it's just a little thing, he might not want to damage his reputation. He might just hand other people a fat stack of cash, write off his car, go buy a new one, who cares? But maybe if it's a bit bigger, if it's obviously the other person's fault, all of that sort of stuff, then he might actually want to report it. So this app, it could be pre-programmed with the insurance company's detail. It could automatically send you dash cam footage, all the information that's in there. It could ask specific questions about the crash. It could even perhaps be an AI, a personal car crash AI that asks questions and then delivers the appropriate solution. So has anyone hurt? Yes, and we'll send an ambulance. Do you need another car straight away? Yes, we'll get a replacement car for you. Do you need a tow truck? Yes, we'll get a tow truck to the scene immediately. Maybe it could give you an estimate based on what you've loaded on or what's been automatically sent away on how much money it's going to cost you. It could give you advice like, oh, actually, you might need to call a lawyer about this, or actually everything's fine and you can just continue on your way. So we can see from using Lewis Hamilton as opposed to, Jane, who's got 2 kids and drives around a Corolla, who might be more like your regular user base, we end up with quite an exciting and perhaps eccentric idea that we could then, narrow down and turn into something more practical for our user base eventually. But we might have never had this idea for our personal car crash AI if we were using Jane with the 2 kids to think about this, or if we just threw everyone together and said, all right, how about it, brainstorm, how could we make this experience better? So that's what our group came up with, which I think is quite cool.
Cool. Thanks, Rhiannon. Awesome. Nice. So I suppose, so I will show what my team has had a crack at. There you go, and I'll share. There you go. So can everyone see my mural? I'll explain it in a second, but yeah, perfect. Thank you. So the way that we tackled the role play was that we spent a lot of the time sort of thinking about, okay, how we prepare for one if we were to run a role play. And what we thought was, okay, well, the problem that we're trying to solve is that when people have a crash on the motorway, they struggle to recall all the key details of the crash. And one of the things that we want to play with and experiment and ideate on is, well, would an interview script make life a little bit easier? Would that make it easier for people to not just recall details, but also to take a breath, especially after something, that could be quite nasty that's just happened, right? And so we've kind of got that framing in mind. And then we thought about, okay, well, what are the biggest risks or assumptions that we have about the problem and this particular idea? And so just to give you a bit of a flavor, some of the assumptions that we thought about was, well, would they actually want to use the script anyway? Do they have something already? Or would they actually feel like something of this form would work? We're also basing it on the assumption that drivers are relatively coherent when they actually are in that interview position as well, to share those details with clarity. And also we need to consider people who, say, could be deaf or from different cultures that might comprehend the information very differently. So we've got to present it in a way that's applicable to anyone. And so by capturing all of these assumptions that are high risk and they're unvalidated, we haven't tested them yet, we've got no evidence to back them up, it means when we think about our role play, we can actually target these specific assumptions. And so we've got this list of risks. And so now we're thinking, okay, well, what would a set look like? What props would we have? What roles would we have? And so what we thought was, well, probably what makes the most sense is we probably need reference footage of crashes just to try and get people into that mindset, having scenario cards that they can pick from a bag so they don't know which type of crash they're heading into if they're the driver, say, recalling that story. And it's to give that feeling of, oh, I can't quite recall the details, because I only had 5 or 10 seconds to see them all. We've also thought about things like we need to actually have a space that makes people feel safe, especially if we are bringing people in that have been through crashes. We want to be able to do it in such a way that they feel like they can open up or relive some of that genuine experience. And we've also thought about, well, we probably need to create almost like character sheets, roles. So different people understand, oh, right, I'm the police officer. This is kind of the mindset I bring to the table. And this is what I need to do in order to partake in this role play. And so the different kinds of roles that we had people that were obviously the driver, the driver who did it, the driver who was the victim. We had passengers. We had the claim adjuster from the insurance side of things. I think probably the more interesting ones were subtleties like if we invited a stakeholder into this role play, let's say we've done it 5 times, we've learned some really cool insights. We'd probably want to stick them, either take them and make them be either the police officer or the driver victim, because those 2 different personas are really at the center of this new experience that we want to present. So that's kind of the structure of that role play. And what we've also got on the side here is when you're actually running that role play, let's say it's for 45 minutes or so, what you would do is you'd set up a Zoom camera in the room and you'd have 2 people in another room recording insights and things they notice. And the way they do that is by recording them as how might we questions. So for example, take away these 3. So for example, one of the things we noticed when we were role playing is that we had some kids in the room just to role play being passengers, and they actually felt really scared talking to a police officer. So how might we make that less scary for them? So you can kind of see over time, as you adjust the experience and the risks and the props, you can then sort of pick out more insights that can form that ideation stage of where you want to go from here. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, I suppose, in terms of those 2 different tools. And what we'll do as well, because I appreciate lots of you will probably want to have a crack yourselves, is we'll follow up with exports of these mural boards, so that way you can have a play by yourself. It's definitely, we're not precious about this stuff, but I think what would be really cool, obviously for Rhiannon and I to say thanks so much for having us, but more importantly, I guess, to open it up and just see if folks have any questions or thoughts that they want to bring to the table. I know we've covered a lot, but yeah, just to give people.
We've got one question in the chat, and I think it's from you, Anthony. We talked earlier about speakers dominating brainstorming sessions, and
yeah,
the question is like, how do these techniques actually mitigate that issue?
Yeah, so I think the biggest example, I guess, is that because in situations like, say, in a situation like a role play, because you can you can give people different purposes, different things they're bringing to the table, and they're all equal. They're all equally important. Some of these activities only work if everyone plays their part. So I think you're using these techniques in a tactical way. So if you know, for example, if you have someone who is quite dominant and outspoken, you could actually have them, rather than be in the role play or the activity, they could actually be collecting insights in a completely different room. Or if you've got someone who feels very staunchly about the way that, in my example, the way that a police officer would respond, you could actually make them the police officer. So putting them in their shoes, right? So that's definitely one technique. It's really hard. I don't think either solves it head on, but it does mitigate those chances as opposed to just being around the table, right? Yeah.
Good.
And then for my technique, even though, so in that session, I facilitated by writing stuff on the cards. What you would normally kind of do, either in a digital whiteboard or in real space, is you would give everyone kind of a stack of Post-it notes each, or, digitally, and have people write up their own ideas and stick them on the board. So it's not necessarily as much of a verbal exercise as when we did it just now. Kind of everyone can get a say by putting up what they think that character would think or feel or do. So it kind of minimizes that that domineering a bit. And I think it also kind of maybe takes away the power a little bit from a domineering person, because you're not saying, what would you do with your expertise and your years in this thing? You're saying, actually, what would Lewis Hamilton do? So they can't say, well, I would do this and I know best because I've been working here for 50 years and have so much experience. But actually, we're not asking about you, Dave. We're asking about Lewis Hamilton. Sorry if there's any Daves in the room. So actually doesn't really matter so much what you think, Dave. Actually,
Totally.
It's about what Lewis Hamilton would do.
Yeah, it's just that little bit of separation, right? Is enough to solve it. Yeah.
Any other questions from the group?
Whoa, this is an easy crowd, man. I thought I was going to get grilled. Wow.
I think there's a question from Jim. Need some techniques for getting census and prioritizing ideas to take action.
Yes.
Dot voting.
Yeah. So you can.
Heard of dot voting? So once you've got all your ideas generated up on your, digital or your digital whiteboard or your physical whiteboard, you can say, all right, everyone gets 5 dots. Now you need to vote on the ideas that you think are the best and the idea with the most dots and so on in order. That's how you can prioritize it, and that's how you can also make sure everyone has a fair say. So that's actually quite a great technique for once you've generated a bunch of ideas, how do you prioritize and take them forward? Give everyone 5 votes.
Yeah, I really like it as well. Let's say one way I've done it too is that you have your team say all vote. So you kind of have a feel for, this is where we want to move from here. And then what you do is you actually invite your stakeholders to vote, but they don't see your results. So that's a really good way to ferret out where is that person's head at, and are we aligned or are we not? And it can be a very, very powerful way to ferret out deeper concerns that maybe weren't at the surface until they see something for real. So I think that's a really good way of using it. And the dot voting is a technique that came out of the design sprint book that we showed you. So I definitely recommend, checking it out.
We've got one from the Hive Brain there about using some liberating structures like 1, 2, 4 all to kind of.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Perfect.
Oh yeah, and another comment there. Somebody's obviously read the book. Quoting Jake Knapp, saying that you've got the decision maker in that you nominate that as a role as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I've also seen it where sometimes you can be in a position where you don't have much representation from your customer base. Like you might just have one person that is the customer, right? And so what you can do is you can weight the votes. So you can give them slightly more weighting if they know their community really well, for example. So there's lots of ways you can almost calibrate it to make it work based on the people you have in the room.
Yeah, and Ruth's made a comment. I think we've opened a can of worms here because she's suggesting we need a session on defining problems now.
Oh, my favourite.
Yeah. So
Oh yes.
we might put a pin in that and come back to it at some
Oh
point.
yeah, it's a great one. Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, I'm conscious that we're at 7 o'clock. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to hit the pause button and stop recording. Is there any final thoughts or questions from anyone?
Ooh, here we go.
Is anyone gonna run away and use any of these techniques tomorrow, or perhaps in the next week or month? Can anyone see any kind of immediate practicality for any of their projects?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I do like using the personas. I've used that a lot myself. So, so the new one for me was the role playing. So I'm gonna see if I can squeeze that in somewhere. But yeah, all right. Well, I'm gonna draw tonight's to a close. I'd like to thank Aaron and Rhiannon for coming along and doing this session. It's been a pleasure working with you and sorting this out. And I'm going to do a plug for next month's Agile Auckland meeting. We've got Nick Ford, who I know a lot of you here in Auckland will know all about from Sky City. And he's going to be doing a session with us on increasing analytical thinking in Agile teams. So what is it, how to do it, where to get started? I'm sure it's going to be a really good session. For a start, it's Nick, and he's very good. And secondly, it's a really big topic. So please keep an eye out for that. We'll advertise on the Slack channel, the meetup, and on LinkedIn on our channel there. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks for taking part. And again, thanks, Aaron and Ray. You're wonderful.
No, thanks so much, team.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Aaron and Ray.
Awesome.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Have a great evening.